terrifying, horrifying, bloody, ghoulish, eerie. You wake up in a cold sweat. Your chest throbs, your jaw tight. An electric sensation of fear courses through your body. You're beginning to piece it together. It was a nightmare. Why did they happen, and what can you do about them? Are they just an unpleasant fact of life, or could there be something of value for you lurking beneath? That's what you're going to find out today on Dream Speak. They may be terrifying, but what if I told you that, like the emotion of fear, nightmares have a use? Over the years, we at DreamSpeak have had nightmares about many of our deep-seated fears. Problems at work, being misunderstood or falsely accused, losing control. We're going to interpret several real examples of nightmares in this video, and hopefully shed some light on this shadowy type of dream. It's healthy to take a close look at your nightmares when you have them. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear idea of how to cut down on nightmares, and how to work with the nightmares you do have so you can understand them and resolve them. So what are nightmares? We have nightmares when our inner self wants us to understand something important, and we haven't gotten the message. You'll have dreams that aren't nightmares about an issue first, usually a series. If you haven't remembered them or haven't responded to them, you may have a nightmare. You should think of nightmares as a last resort. The deepest part of you knows there's something you need to be working on, but you've been overlooking it for a period of time, and it's starting to become urgent. There are other kinds of frightening dreams that are not nightmares. One example is featured on our podcast episode about the types of dreams, which you can find on YouTube and all popular streaming services. If you haven't listened to the DreamSpeak podcast, it's a convenient learning experience anytime you have a few minutes. In each episode, we interpret a dream, then in the second half of the show, we take you behind the dreams to explain how we did it. We also invite listeners to submit their dreams. There's a chapter in the episode about psychic attack dreams. They are something that we have personal experience with, and they're not message dreams, so they aren't meant to be interpreted. Being able to correctly identify a nightmare that has a message for you from a fear-inducing dream that doesn't will be helpful. What good are nightmares? Nightmares are good at getting our attention. When other messages aren't getting through in our dreams will resort to fear to make sure that we remember them. Fear is our most primitive emotion. Processed in the amygdala, inside the temporal lobe of our brain, fear is the emotion of survival. It signals danger and gets an immediate response. It triggers reflexes in the most instinctive part of our brain, the brainstem. Our breathing or heart rate might speed up. We at DreamSpeak believe that life requires learning and effort to change for the better. When we have a nightmare, we aren't in any physical danger, but our inner self is using danger signals to make us pay attention to the fact there is something in our lives which is holding us back, stealing our joy, and preventing our progress. In the core of who we are, we know this is an unsustainable situation. It's our nature to move forward. Nonetheless, change is hard. People can spend a long time in resistance before facing the challenge represented by the nightmare head-on. Although nightmares are harder to suppress than other kinds of dreams, it's possible, and we've seen it happen before. If you're going through a stressful time in your life, and you find yourself not feeling rested in the morning, one reason might be that you're having frightening dreams but not remembering them. See our video, How Do I Remember My Dreams, for some proven tips to develop your relationship with dreaming. During a challenging period like this, you could use some guidance. Dreams can provide that. Once you've successfully started recalling dreams, you may notice that what you remember includes a lot of darkness. Nighttime, rooms with the lights out, people in shadow. Nightmares often take place at night or in dark places. Why is that? These symbols indicate that there's an issue that you don't have awareness of. Nightmares are all about trying to get you to become aware of something. So how can you reduce the amount of nightmares you have? By forming a stronger relationship with your dreams. If you pay attention to your dreams and learn to get their messages, then you act on the things that they're telling you. You'll have nightmares rarely or not at all. Nightmares make you feel vulnerable because they're about deep issues that you may not want to look at. Changing the underlying issues in our lives to heal the things that cause the nightmares in the first place can feel daunting, especially because sometimes nightmares can be pointing to the core issues of our lives, things that may require courageous work for years or even decades. Take heart, because even a small stride on your core issues can be very empowering. If you're enjoying this video, please give us a like and consider subscribing to DreamSpeak. Don't forget to click the bell to be notified when we post a new dream video. To encourage you in your efforts to work with your nightmares, I'm going to share several nightmares I've had over the years. Nightmares can be scary because they're filled with the unknown and the unexpected. But understanding the meaning of your nightmares can bring unexpected gifts. Stay tuned until the end, because making this video brought new insight that is already benefiting my life. The first nightmare we're going to talk about started with the image of a car that I thought was kind of cheap. I got in and I started pulling away. I stopped for a moment to let a young couple with bags of healthy groceries pass by. Later, I was walking down a wooded path at night when an animal approached me. I felt afraid, and I never got a good look at the animal as a result of my fear. I stopped on the path and looked to my right. There was a dark house in the woods with the entire front missing, so I could see inside. In the main room, there was a man standing with his face violently ripped off. The entire room was a bloodbath with blood on the walls and ceiling. A nightmare is interpreted according to the same rules as any other message dream. Let's dive in. The cheap car corresponds to having a lack mentality. Since cars indicate your physical body, it's an indication that I had a disparaging attitude about my ability to provide for myself. The couple indicated a productive partnership within me that was relying on healthy knowledge, symbolized by the food, to keep them strong. The forest indicates the complex terrain of your subconscious, essentially the complexity of your whole self. Entering a forest can imply beginning a new, daring adventure in life, venturing into the unknown. Since the forest represents our subconscious, this implies that any outward journey is also an inward journey to discover deeper truths about ourselves. I had just completed my first term in graduate school, and this aspiration to advance my career was leading to a new and unknown place in my life, while having a major effect on my inner self as well. The unknown animal on the path that I was frightened of indicates a habit that I was afraid to become aware of. Turning rightward indicates making a correct decision. That decision was to have the courage to face the part of myself inside the house. All indoor spaces indicate mindsets. So the house was a mindset, and the man standing inside is a part of my conscious thinking since his gender matches mine. The human face has to do with your identity. It was showing me that my identity had been ripped away from me during my first term in graduate school. But who did the ripping away? The insight that I had was that it was me. The exaggerated loss of blood was meant to get my attention. Blood represents your vitality. The bloody house represented a mindset that was harmful for me, that was draining away my vitality. I realized I had allowed graduate school to steal my previous identity as a successful person, but I was so busy with school, I hadn't had time to deal with this. I was suppressing it instead, which is why it became a nightmare full of dark places. Instead of developing a healthy perspective, such as, I still have a lot to learn, and it may take a few years for me to advance my career, without realizing it, I had given myself an existential crisis. It had gotten out of hand, and I felt I didn't know who I was anymore, and that I would never be successful. Confronting these hurtful mindsets allowed me to begin treating myself with more kindness. I began building a better perspective, healing, and developing a new sense of my identity connected to the future of my career, and I finished graduate school successfully. The next nightmare happened the night after I watched a documentary about mounting inequality in the United States. I had a nightmare about walking through the aftermath of a terrorist attack. It had taken place on a beach. What had been a beautiful and serene place of enjoyment had been ripped apart by a bomb. The scene included gory human remains. There was an uncanny symbol in this dream, meaning something out of place meant to get our attention and get us thinking. Incense. For some reason, I just knew that there was a long-standing custom of burning large quantities of incense on this beach, and I further knew that smelling the incense had caused the perpetrators of the bombing to lose control of themselves and become violent. The message of this dream was that I should realize that hatred in any form is corrosive. It was showing me that although I would never support terrorism, I had let hatred of the richest people in the world pollute my heart, so much that this hateful mindset was harming me. My sense of injustice about inequality in my country was so pronounced that watching the documentary had caused my outrage to explode, destroying many peaceful and serene parts of myself, symbolized by the people on the beach. The bomb symbolizes uncontrolled change, in this case, a change in my mindset. I had lost my serenity to destructive thinking by letting myself get seriously upset. It was showing me how much that kind of thinking can hurt me. Why the incense? In this case, the personal meaning of incense, rather than its universal symbolism, is all I needed to understand it. I used to frequently burn incense while engaged in meditation, and it helped me get to a more elevated state of consciousness on many occasions. Why would this peace-inducing substance spur the terrorists in my dream to violence? The answer is unique to me. From a place of elevated consciousness, I can feel a keen need for greater justice in the world. However, this dream showed me I had let my mind be taken over by thoughts of hate, rather than working hard to find a legitimate response to my craving for justice. This dream had become a nightmare because my inner self wanted me to know that hatred is toxic, and I should work to get it out of my system as soon as possible. In the case of this dream, simply having awareness of these toxic emotions helped me get a handle on them. Over the next few years, I began volunteering as a political activist and in various community causes, and my sense of empowerment grew. I no longer feel ruled by resentment like I did after the documentary. The third nightmare was centered on a famous actor. He's a well-known figure in Hollywood. In this dream, he was a surgeon, not an actor, but he was also an evil sociopath. His sole obsession was to find victims for a surgery he had perfected that was a lot like a lobotomy. It involved putting a narrow tube into a person's brain, then sliding an implant down the tube. He did this without the patient's consent. His motive? He was erasing people's memories. One of the interesting things about dream messages is that there's a distinction between the figure that represents ourselves in the dream, who we refer to as the dreamer, and all the other aspects of ourselves in the dream. Sometimes we aren't even present in a dream scene. We're just a disembodied presence watching the events unfold. In dreams like this, we say the dreamer wasn't present. But in this dream, with the evil surgeon, not only was the dreamer, meaning me, present, but the memory-erasing surgery had also been performed on the dreamer. To understand the importance of the dreamer receiving the surgery, you have to understand what makes the dreamer different than other aspects. In a dream, each aspect of you, the people in your dreams, represent a particular quality or possibly 2 or 3 qualities that you have. The dreamer represents all of your qualities combined. It's the present state of your consciousness, the present state of who you are. When a change in a dream happens to the dreamer, that change hasn't just impacted some small part of you, it's pervasive. So this surgery had been carried out on many parts of me, but most importantly, the dreamer had undergone the surgery. So I had my memory erased, so to speak. Surgery is a willful, premeditated act, not just a random whack over the head. So that implied I had been willfully suppressing something. What was that something? Well, I had recently been passed over for a promotion at work. This was after completing my graduate education. Are you picking up on a theme in my nightmares? Another career-related disappointment. Stay tuned until the end to see just how much insight you can glean from seeing a pattern like this in your dreams. The significance of the surgeon being a famous actor has to do with my attitude about him. I find him profoundly gifted, but I probably unfairly also view him as completely empty inside, having a worldview that's totally empty of truth. I see him as deeply deluded. This surgery was about deluding myself, that I hadn't been impacted by this setback, that I could just move forward, convincing myself that I was very successful after a serious letdown. This dream became a nightmare because I needed a warning to acknowledge the pain of my loss and to find healthy ways to contextualize what had happened, not sweep it under the rug. As a result of this dream, I first spent some time grieving. Then I decided that reframing what success looked like in my profession would be good for my mental health. And years later, it has. In the final nightmare I'm going to share with you, I was with my wife when I received a phone call. At first, it seemed pretty innocuous, until the voice on the other end grew more and more demanding. We were being told that we would need to lead a public event on several dates. I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable leading the events. I was uncomfortable with the implication that we had no choice. The dates were also listed at us. We weren't asked. We were in a house in some unknown locale in South America, where I've never visited, but I have been to Central America. And as I gazed out our window, I saw in the distance where a large team of workers had cleared a field in the jungle, and they were building a large dome-shaped building. They had not laid a foundation, and the building materials were cheap. I knew this was supposed to be the setting where my wife and I would offer our events. It was bright and sunny outside. Soon, I found myself waking up in a bedroom in the house. It was now dark, and I felt afraid immediately. My wife told me she was leaving the room to go check on something, and that gave me an ominous feeling. I didn't want her to go, and I felt she wasn't listening to me. It was then that I noticed there was a single deer antler from a young buck placed on my chest and pointed directly at the hollow of my throat. This terrified me enough that I woke up from the dream. When I had this dream, my wife and I were attending a spiritual retreat. The universal meaning of a round building is a mindset of unity. For most people, an elevated mindset. The South American setting had to do with meeting an attendee of the retreat that was from Colombia. This happened the day before. His personality reminded me fondly of my travels in Latin America and the associations that it carries for me of having a strong bond with nature, gratitude for the bounty of the earth, a strong sense of community, of humility, and a sense of perspective on life. Working to live, not living to work, as I've heard it put. These are qualities that I wish to emulate. My wife is perhaps the most important subconscious aspect of me. It's the aspect that I do most of my creating in life with. And in this dream, she represented unconditional support for me. Every aspect also has its shadow. The shadow side of that unconditional support, which applied to this nightmare, is that she might be willing to cover my mistakes or excuse laxity instead of expecting me to be self-disciplined. The antler has a shamanic meaning for me because deer in the hero's journey often lure the hero into a wilderness where deeper dimensions of myself will be discovered, but where I could also get lost, meaning lose some of my workaday priorities and focus on things without material value, such as beauty, inner harmony, patience, wholeness. These are all qualities that I associate with nature. Finally, the symbolism of the hollow of my throat. It made me think of my voice box, of speech and singing. The retreat that I was at included a lot of music, and I was also exploring spiritual practices at that time that related to chanting. Putting it all together, I realized I was afraid the spiritual practices that I was engaging in would throw my career off track by changing my priorities from material priorities around advancement and promotions to priorities connected to the human heart and personal growth. The mentality that the best things in life are free. In the video, How Do I Remember My Dreams? There is a section intended to help you decide the best way to capture your own dreams so you can interpret them later. We mentioned that journaling can help you look back over long sweeps of time in your dream life, and that doing so can be unexpectedly powerful. Producing this video had that effect on me. As I looked back over a selection of nightmares spanning a number of years, I realized there was a message calling out to me from my dream life that was still relevant today, thus demonstrating the paradox of nightmares, that something that seems to be harmful turns out to be even more helpful, that dreams that feel like they can cut you to the bone are just as likely to reveal some of the deepest truths about yourself that you may ever learn, truths that can become guideposts to a satisfying life. My nightmares started with the loss of identity over lack of worldly success, followed by a spiteful willingness to hurt myself and possibly others due to outrage over inequality. Then, there was a powerful force within me that was erasing memories, sending me into denial about my career. Finally, in a spiritually charged environment, I get a message that continuing to go deeper into the spiritual dimension of who I am may lead me away from ambition towards unknown parts of myself. I may become permanently lost to the worldly side of myself and instead become caught up in an adventure of the heart. It's a threat to the faceless man from my dream years ago who is desperate to put back on a mask, like the one that the mad surgeon wore. To the healthiest parts of myself, it's exciting and enlivening. It's not everyone's preferred story, but it is mine, in all its uniqueness and humiliation and quiet triumph. The years-long story of these nightmares have all been breadcrumbs leading me toward greater freedom and ultimately greater satisfaction from my life. What gifts come from having nightmares? Nightmares help us to focus. If we can understand their guidance, there's nothing more important for us to focus on at this time in our lives than how to respond to the message of that single dream. Nightmares help us keep perspective on life. We wake up, even after dying in our dreams, and realize we've survived. We may be going through profound changes or profound periods of indecision, but we survive. They help us understand that we needn't be ruled by fear, and that we can turn our fear into an ally if it can motivate us to make needed change. The secret of nightmares is that ultimately, nightmares are for our good. Just remember that nightmares are often like an onion, the layers of which have built up over time. With patience, you can learn to resolve the underlying issues and begin to get your messages in a gentler way. Submit a nightmare below, or help someone else with your suggestions about what it might mean. You're now armed with some fresh perspective on nightmares. You might be feeling enthusiastic about dreaming better tonight. If so, we recommend that you watch our video, How Do I Remember My Dreams? Or check out the Dream Speak podcast special episode about the types of dreams next. Thank you for learning with us today on Dream Speak, and keep dreaming.